Hello and welcome to this latest video in the OCR GCSE Computer Science series. In this short video we're going to be undertaking a walking talking mock of the May 2018 paper for Unit 1 Computer Systems. So this is a walkthrough of how to get the shortest and quickest answers to get 80 out of 80 on the May 2018 official past paper. Now it'd be really useful if you had a copy of the paper, the idea being you can go through each question, then play my short section explaining what answer I would be giving and exactly why. As with most answers in the exam paper, there are often more than one answers that are acceptable, and I'll try and talk through those in as much depth as I can. Like I say, my aim is to try and get 80 out of 80 in the shortest and most efficient way possible. As hopefully you know, these are the topics that can be assessed as part of Unit 1. So there are 6 key sections: systems architecture, memory and storage, networking, network security, system software, and the impact of technology. So any of these things could come up in a normal paper, and many of these do in the 2018 paper. It's worth noting, if you're sitting your exam in the summer of 2022, 1.5 has been nearly fully excluded from the pre-release materials, which means 1.5 likely won't come up in the 2022 sitting of this exam, but may well do in the later years. So let's get started. Hopefully you've got a copy of the paper in front of you. Let's kick off. So question 1 talks about William, who's creating a film for school using a digital video camera. The digital camera has got secondary storage, and the first question is to explain why the video camera needs secondary storage. So our main memory is all about making the camera work. The secondary storage is all about storing the long-term files and probably the photos that William is taking. So really this question is asking us 2 reasons we want the camera to store pictures in the long term. So for me, I've put to store images in the long term, even once the power is switched off. So we know that RAM is volatile. Data held in our RAM won't be there once the camera is switched off. The secondary storage will allow our pictures to be saved once the camera is restarted. We need a second point though, and what's our second point going to be? Well, it allows the images to easily be transferred to a PC or another device. So the secondary storage in a camera is probably going to be the SD card. So the second reason we can have there is it's easy to move those images around between different devices, for example a PC for editing. In this case they say the digital video camera uses solid state storage. Explain why solid state is the most appropriate type of storage for a digital video camera. Now these sorts of questions we need to be looking at the number of marks that are on offer. So this is a 4-mark question, so what they're really asking for is 2 ways that are then explained. So 2 marks for the ways in which the SSD is appropriate, and then 2 marks for explaining those points. So we're thinking, what are the benefits around solid state storage? Well, solid state storage can be very small, and that will allow it to easily slot into the camera, for example an SD card probably in this case. It's also very durable because there are no moving parts, and that means that if the camera is dropped, the SD card will probably survive, or the solid state storage will probably survive. So for me, like I say, a magnetic drive would have a spinning disk. The solid state drive hasn't got that, and that means it's probably suitable for this device. It's also very small, very light. You can have anything sort of along those lines. Part B is one of those questions where I'm afraid you're either going to be right or wrong. It says that the computer has got 1 GB of storage free. Calculate the number of videos that could be stored on the computer if each video was 100 megabytes in size. Show your... We want to be taking 1,000, so 1,000 for the gigabytes, and dividing by 100. So we should be looking at 10 as the answer for that question, 10 videos. Now many of you will be thinking, well, 1 gigabyte is actually 1024 megabytes. This is a non-calculator paper, so you'll never be asked to do that sort of division. You can always round to 1,000 when we're thinking about a gigabyte, just to help with that sort of ease of the sorts of calculations you might be asked to do. Going on to the second page, we're asked for a program that calculates the size of a file in bytes. The program must ask the user for an input, calculate the output in a user-friendly way. We're then asked to write an algorithm. So most of the time we wouldn't really be expecting an algorithm question in Unit 1, but they can come up in the context of the Unit 1 content. So obviously binary is a big part of Unit 1. So although this is an algorithm or a pseudocode question, this might well come up as it's within the context of the Unit 1 content. Now this is a 6-mark question here, so the really important part here is that even if you're not sure you can get 6 out of 6, is that you do give a solid go to at least the start of the question. For example, all we need to do is input some kind of number to get the first of the marks. So I'm going to output, please enter the size in megabytes. I'm going to input number. I'm then going to calculate size, and I'm doing that by taking the number that's been entered, timesing by 1,000, and then timesing by 1,000 again. So I'm converting from megabytes to kilobytes. That's my first 1,000, and then I'm converting from kilobytes to bytes, and that's my second 1,000. Then we need to output the answer, and it says to do that in some sort of user-friendly format. So I'm saying output your size is, then my variable size, and then the word bytes. Like I say, that's a nice 6-mark question, and all of you will be able to get at least 2 out of 6, even if you just say, hey, input number, and then some form of output at the end. Really important with those pseudocode questions, we give them a go, even if we think we are going to struggle for the full 6 out of 6. William's computer has utility programs installed, including automatic backup. William can choose between full and incremental. Identify the backup method William should use for backing up his computer. Justify your answer. This is a nice question because it doesn't actually matter which method you put as long as you back it up. So I'm going to say incremental here. So incremental is the option I'm going for, and I then need to make some points to make sure I'm getting those marks. Only the changes since the last backup are stored. That speeds up the backup, and it means it takes up less storage. Things like the operating system, for example, would not change, so don't need to be backed up every day. The key bit there is, are you making 3 points? I've said only the changes will be backed up. That's 1. That speeds up the backup. That's 2. And that means the backup will take up less space. That's 3. Too often on these sorts of questions, students will get 1 or 2 marks out of 3. They know the content, but they've not had the exam technique to make sure they get the 3 marks. We're then asked to give 1 additional utility program that William could make use of and describe how he would use it. There's lots of options. I've gone for antivirus to scan through the computer's files for any malware, removing them as needed. So you're getting a mark for antivirus, but you could also have something like disk defragmentation there, and then 2 marks for explaining what it does. So it scans the computer for malware, that's 1 mark, and it removes those malicious files as needed, and that's the 2nd mark of that sort of second part of the question. William then wants to upload his videos on the internet and is considering releasing them under a Creative Commons license. Explain how a Creative Commons license will impact the use of William's videos by other people. So we need to know here that Creative Commons is a copyright style license which allows a user to very quickly give out a copyright style contract with sort of all of the elements of that written up for them already. And there's different Creative Commons licenses that says whether you can reuse it, whether you can change it, whether you can sell it, and all those sorts of things. So again, we're thinking here, how do I make my 3 points? So they are a set of licenses that allow for free distribution of original works while allowing the author to keep control of them and how they're used. William can decide if others could edit his video, for example, or just use it how it is. So there are different Creative Commons licenses that dictate how those videos that he's creating can be used. Now again, it's all about, are you able to make 3 points? Do you know what Creative Commons is? And can you then maybe give a couple of examples of the sorts of things that William might say within his version of his Creative Commons license? On the question 2 now, some of the questions in the computer science papers are quite lengthy, so there might only be 3 or 4 separate questions on your exam. So this is question 2. A house has computers in each room and a central router. Every room allows both Ethernet and Wi-Fi connections to the router. Identify if the house is a LAN or a WAN and justify your choice. Currently, a LAN is a local area network. The mistake here, though, is as your justification, you can't say, well, it's a network over a local area, because all you're doing there is repeating the question. The definition for a LAN is always going to be a network over a small geographical area, such as a single house. There is only one router within the network. Now, I've added that second part because, again, it's a 3-mark question. Over a small geographical area might just get you one of those marks that you need for the bottom part. Each local area network has just one router. A WAN, a wide area network, is then over a wide or large geographical area and will contain multiple routers, making up multiple LAN networks, which combine to make the wide area network. Nice question. Next, we've got 5 marks available here, and all we have to do is tick one box in each row to identify. Note the number 1 is in bold, so if you put 2 ticks in any of these boxes, you are not going to get the marks there. So a wired connection is Ethernet. More likely to be affected by interference is Wi-Fi. Data can be transmitted at a faster speed is Ethernet. Wireless transmission is Wi-Fi, and shorter transmission range before data is lost is Wi-Fi. We're then asked to describe the purpose of the router in the house for 2 marks. So we're thinking of 2 points here we can make router. On these sorts of questions where it's 2 very defined points, it's absolutely acceptable to bullet point your answers, and actually probably quite sensible to bullet point. So this router is going to direct the network packets around the network. So it's going to direct those packets of data that are whizzing around and push them all sort of onto the correct location. And a router provides IP addresses for each device on the network. So a switch will give MAC addresses, but a router will always give IP addresses. Last one on this page is to identify 2 additional items of network hardware apart from the cables and a router that may be used in the house network. So we might be thinking of something like a switch and a wireless access point, because we've been told there is Wi-Fi within this network. Question 2 is all around sort of networking, and part D is then around the internet side of the networking topic. It says a user is entering a URL into their web browser and using one of the computers for that, and there is a system which finds the IP address of the web server associated with the URL. This is one of quite few questions where there really is just one. The answer there is DNS, or the domain name service, or the domain name server. That's what you need to have for that answer. That is the service which looks up IP addresses in a big old table and returns the corresponding, looks up URLs and returns the corresponding IP address. We're then given another nice question where we've got 5 marks just for filling in the gaps. It's asking what happens then to get this request sent to a web server to request this web page. So the request is put. We've then got E. Each packet is given an address and a number. The packets are then sent. The packets are then received. The server checks if all of the packets have arrived. If they've not, they're re-requested. If they have arrived, then it's B. The packets are put in order. And then finally, C, the request is processed once all of those packets are there and they've been placed in order. So again, it's a 80-mark paper, this one, in 90 minutes. You need to get basically, therefore, a mark a minute. This is a nice way to gain ourselves back some time ready for the essay question, which we know we will likely receive at the end. So you've got, in effect, 5 minutes for this question, and it will probably take you all of about 1 minute. So a nice question there to gain some time for you to go back through your paper at the end or to focus in on your essay question. We're then looking at network security. So we know the middle parts of Unit 1 are all about networking, and then 1.4 is around network security. So the house owner is concerned about potential threats. Describe 3 possible threats to computers connected to the network and give 1 way we could reduce each threat. Now, this is a big question. This is 9 marks, so this is almost certainly going to take you up 2 grade boundaries. It will certainly take you up 1. It could well take you up 2 grade boundaries if we nail this question. First of all, do we know 3 threats? Well, that's 3 marks. And then can we explain each one with additional marks? So viruses, a piece of code designed to damage the computer system, for example, by deleting files. I've said what it does, and I've given an example. Prevention, antivirus. So we're getting a mark for virus, we're getting a mark for our definition, and we're getting a mark for our prevention. Hackers, so that's a person attempting to gain unauthorized access, so we'd have something like firewall there. And then data interception, packets of data being intercepted during transmission, and that will be encryption. So like I say, this is a really key question. Even if you just would have put down virus, antivirus, you're still getting 2 out of the 3 marks for the first threat. Doesn't matter what order you put these in, obviously, and there are other threats that you could be putting in getting correct marks. The full mark scheme for this is on the OCR website if you want to compare your answers with all of the ones you might have given. We've then got the large essay question for this paper. There will always be an 8-mark essay question in Unit 1, at least one. And this one is looking at a small island of 100 people that have just been given internet access. It says you might want to consider the inhabitants, the businesses, the ethical issues, and the privacy issues. The essay questions are really easy to lay out. They will always give you those bullet points, and those bullet points need to be your paragraphs. So you want a paragraph about inhabitants, paragraph about businesses, a paragraph about ethics, and a paragraph about privacy. Within each paragraph, you then need to give at least one good thing and at least one bad thing. Try and give a balanced argument. You'll see in my example, I've not always given a balanced argument, but it's certainly a good idea if you can. But if you can't think of a good and a bad thing, put, a couple of good ones or a couple of bad ones. For this question, I'm not going to read my answer in full. You'll see that I've got there 4 paragraphs. The first one is about the inhabitants. The next one is about the businesses. Then we've got bits about ethics, and then we've got bits around privacy. I'd suggest you pause the video at this point, make it full screen, and have a good read through my answer. If you structure your essay question anything like that, you're going to be getting 6, 7, or 8 marks out of 8 for sure. We're then on to question 4, and we've got Alicia, who has designed a computer using the von Neumann architecture. Describe the purpose of 2 registers that are used in the von Neumann architecture. So A, can we remember any? So there are 5 we could look at. And then B, can we explain? So I've gone for the MAR, or the memory address register, and the accumulator. The accumulator is a nice one to remember. Accumulate, means to add up, to keep track of that running total, the accumulated answer that we've got so far. It stores the result or the running total from a calculation. The MAR stores the address where the next instruction is stored. There's, as I say, you can have things like the program counter, the memory data register, and the current instruction register for that one. For each one, you'll need to explain it. We're then asked to talk about clock speed and clock speed of 3.8 gigahertz. Describe what is meant by a clock speed. So it's a 2-mark question, 2 points. It's in effect the number of fetch, decode, execute cycles undertaken each second. And in this example, we mean 3.8 billion cycles per second. So I've given my definition, but I've also related it to the content in the question for the 2nd mark. Alicia says that her computer has a quad-core processor, so it will run twice as fast as a computer with a dual-core processor. Explain why this statement is not always true. Well, okay, it's a quad-core, but we haven't mentioned what the clock speed is. So the clock speed of each core could be lower. That would lower the speed. We've got the RAM size, which is also a factor, and we know that cache size is also a factor. So whenever we're talking about CPU performance, we know we've got cache, clock speed, and cores. Those 3 C's of CPU performance. Also, RAM is in the mix as well, because however fast our CPU is, if we run out of RAM all of the time, it's going to slow down. The computer will only have 2 gigabytes of RAM, but Alicia says that virtual memory can be used instead of adding more RAM. We need to explain then what virtual memory is and how it can compensate for a lack of RAM in Alicia's computer. We're looking for 3 marks. So, virtual memory is used when the RAM is filled. Virtual memory uses the secondary storage as main memory. And data from the RAM can be moved to the virtual memory when it is next needed. So again, I'm looking at, am I making 3 points? Well, I've bullet pointed them. I've made it really obvious to the examiner that I definitely am making there my 3 key points. Explain why it would be beneficial for Alicia to get more RAM instead of relying on virtual. Well, virtual memory is much slower than RAM. It causes disk thrashing, which decreases performance, and that's when data is being copied from the RAM to the virtual memory continually, because the RAM is continually being filled up. We're then looking at, when connecting computers to a network, the use of appropriate protocols. So this is looking at that idea of sort of protocols and layers. Explain what is meant by a protocol. So this is a basic definition question, 2 marks. What does that word mean? Well, a protocol is an agreed set of rules governing how data should be transmitted in a network. So SMTP, POP, IMAP, TCP/IP, those are all protocols where there is an agreed standard for what is going into each packet, how big each packet is, how the packets are numbered, so that when the data arrives at a different computer, it can be put back together again. If we don't agree those protocols, the data is not going to be able to be put back together once the data is sent. For each of the scenarios below, identify the most appropriate protocol and explain the function of the protocol. So it's asking us now, can we think of some different protocols? A user wants to transfer a file. There's a big hit. It's going to be FTP, the File Transfer Protocol. We're getting 1 mark for naming it, and we're getting a 2nd mark for explaining it. Used to transfer files in a client-server model from one computer to another. So anything really there to do around use of file transfer over a protocol system. The customer then wants to securely log into her bank's website to check her account balance. That's got to be HTTPS. So that encrypts web traffic so that we can communicate over the internet, but with our data being encrypted. Things like your password should always go via HTTPS. Last question around protocols. Explain the difference between how IMAP and SMTP protocols are used. So I always remember SMTP as sending mail. So send, SMTP is all about sending mail. IMAP is then around sort of receiving mail, and it downloads a copy of an email to your computer from a server. So IMAP is all about receiving messages, SMTP all about sending messages. That's then the end of the May 2018 Unit 1 paper. As I say, there are 80 marks available in that paper. You need to be looking at somewhere around 69, 70 or 71 for a grade 9. This video has hopefully though shown you how you can get 80 out of 80 in a fairly short, sharp and concise way, to the point, without needing to write huge amounts for each answer, but definitely meeting each mark on the mark scheme. As always, if you have any questions, please do post those either onto Google Classroom or into the comments section below. Thank you very much for watching.